Kenny Schachter suggested yesterday that we have a 3-day seminar on art fairs. I promise you we're not here that long, but he has got a point. It's the question I'm asked most about from people in this industry, actually, is how sustainable is this art fair, is the pace of art fairs? And I always have a very, very unsatisfactory answer, which is it's not sustainable, but it's not going away. We're seeing it play out now. There was a new fair in Taiwan just last weekend. Freeze LA is launching in a few weeks' time. But we've also had Art Stage Singapore cancelled at the last minute, a fair in the Alps that wasn't able to go ahead because it's all too congested. And then we've had MCH announce that they're pulling out of regional fairs, which I think has huge implications. In the past, I've called fairs the frenemy of galleries. They seem to be a fantastic way to drum up business, but they also cost so much time, money, effort that they can be make or break for some galleries. And of course, not all galleries get into all fairs. We're incredibly lucky this morning to have the perfect pair to discuss the implications of art fairs and some of the problems and hopefully the solutions. They both run very different art fairs, but as Lucia said, they also have both worked as gallerists, so they have invaluable thoughts here. Just to my left, we have Elizabeth D., who does so much in the cultural sphere. But for the purposes of this morning, I'm going to introduce her as the co-founder of Independent in New York nearly 10 years ago. Her next edition is very soon, next month. And they also now run a fair in Brussels. To her left, a bit closer to home, we have Maribel López, who is co-director of ARCO, which runs its 38th edition, even sooner than Elizabeth's fair, next month. She has been at ARCO, I think, since 2011, as director of sales and curated programs. And ARCO also has a second edition now in Lisbon. So let's hear from you. I'm going to ask you both the same question to start with, which is that this first one, really. I mean, are art fairs part of the problem for galleries? And what is it you would say about your fair that makes fairs fair?
Well, thank you, Melanie, for having us and opening up the discussion. Art fairs have been a problem for more than a decade. It's part of the reason why we started Independent. It was a generational concept to take back the fair model that was not working for our generation of galleries because of the lack of transparency, because of what we saw as an increasing class divide and inequality in the gallery class system, which has only grown. Because we wanted to have a level and democratic playing field, and we felt we were losing the culture of the gallery with the decrease in footfall, and we wanted to bring some of the time and the experience of seeing exhibitions into a platform. Because the fair market was very different 10 years ago, we used what was that platform as a way to model and prototype something different, something that was more experience-driven, something that created and introduced and brought new concepts forward. And it's something that we wanted to do as a community of galleries. And so that's how we found it, based on those principles. And we've stayed true to that core mission.
And can I just unpick that idea of new experiences? I mean, how is it? How is your fair different, would you say, from what was there?
Because we all come from gallery practice, we approached it from a curatorial perspective. So, for instance, the first thing that we did was secure a former museum, the Dia Center for the Arts, which was in the center of West Chelsea at the time, which was the gallery district before the Lower East Side began. We worked with a scenographer and exhibition designer to engage a different narrative of going through each space. What we loved about the building is that it was a museum experience because you saw the show on multiple vertical levels rather than one big convention center, football field, or what I call refugee camp, or however you want to discuss, or airport, or whatever your reference might be to those kinds of expos. And so that already put us in a nice context. So going back to what Eugenio was saying earlier, which I really value, this idea of context being really at the forefront of how we address space, and working with, rather than asking and pressuring artists to produce for these events, to work from the native environment of the studio and how the gallery is the extension of that native environment, and how we can facilitate and bring about projects that are uniquely created for independent rather than a byproduct of another exhibition elsewhere. So it already created kind of so we have more commissions than a typical environment that are uniquely produced. We also have no aisles, so there is no ability to miss anything. You really do go through each floor in a process. One room leads you to the next, and you're driven by the content of the art that's being presented and showcased there, rather than the brand of the gallery and the dominance of a vertical hierarchy. So that was from the beginning. And what we realized is that collectors were starting to get fatigued 10 years ago, and we're seeing it as a revelation and as a place where they could slow down and do research and have discourse about what they were looking at. And when you take out that public element and you just work with people who are already devoted and very curious, and are interested in evolving their eye and evolving their process, and you mix museum culture and collecting culture together with gallery culture, it can be a really fruitful exchange. And that is really part of the environment, and that's why people value the project so much, and it's just grown very naturally in a way that I feel is very sustainable.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much. Maribel, you might want to react to the football field. The football field.
Yeah, okay.
Just because you are in a big expo center.
Yes, ARCOmadrid, of course, is in IFEMA. It's part of IFEMA, and it's a big football field. It's 2 huge halls. So truth is that from that side, we are really classical and old art fair. Truth is that when you were speaking, I was thinking, we also think that this is what we're doing. We're also thinking these kind of things, And yesterday also when I think Tim was mentioning the idea of the slower movement, I remember that at some point, the way we understand with Carlos, the way we've been working in ARCO, we even thought, okay, maybe we can use the concept, the slower fair. And then we looked at each other and it was like, no, that's marketing drama, But we wanted to say is that we really try to work with the galleries in a way that they can present their artists deeply, even if it's such a big fair, We offer them as many options as we can invent, so they can work with their artists and kind of translate the way they work in their own spaces, in their galleries, and kind of bring it there, because we understand, there are many fairs, and we all need also to explain a different story. We need to try to become something important for the galleries. So I was thinking, when you launched a question, if the fair were a problem, part of the problem for the galleries. I think it is, but we are, let's say, but also I think at some point there was some craziness, and galleries were too scared that people will not go to the spaces, just do one fair after the other, that really drained really their resources. And I think right now maybe things leveled a bit, or if not they should, and galleries, we should really think where they belong. Because we are now all fairs, we are now offering different perspectives. We in Madrid, we are investigating Latin American art, we are working with the galleries to really present fewer artists, even it's in our regulations, the galleries cannot present many artists unless they have a big booth. So we are trying to explain that ways of doing that. Yes, and regarding the fairness, how do we try to be fair to to the galleries, we really, for instance, we work very hardly in trying to establish a pricing policy that it's positive for them, that starts from low, being that of course it's expensive to invest in an offer, but for younger galleries, and then we offer discounts when galleries get a bit bigger. We have all kind of formulas, and basically we invest most or a lot of the money the galleries bring into the fair to bringing them collectors and curators, to bringing them the right audience for their projects.
So your system, sorry, is that if a gallery gets still a small gallery, but if they want a bigger size, you'll help them, you'll have a discount at that level?
We have just several, plenty of formulas.
Yeah,
We really try
I can
to
imagine.
make it as organic and react to their needs as much as we can. I mean, even if it's a big company and it takes time and it's a nightmare to get that, I tell you. But I mean, from the opening galleries, the younger galleries who pay under 6,000, so they can only stay there. That's an example. They can only stay in the section for 2 years if the curator selected them for the 2 years. So the third year they have to apply and enter the main program, which is really a big step and it's difficult. So when they are accepted, we offer them
You help them
a very special
graduate.
discount. Yeah,
Yes.
those kind of things.
Yes, please.
I think there's something about the traditional fair structure that infantilizes the gallery. The idea that you are the client, but then you have to apply to be accepted. And the politics of that is a huge conflict of interest, because some of these people may be your collaborators or your partners, but they're also your competitors. And I don't know that is really working. And we're starting to see lots of changes, as you had said, about how, new models that are coming up, like Independent and others, are starting, that people are reacting positively to, can easily be implemented into more traditional fair structures like ARCO.
How do you do the selection? Through a curatorial team? By invitation through a curatorial team?
Well, like for instance, Freeze LA, has decided that smaller is better.
Yes.
So
Size
they,
is an interesting...
and they have also decided that they're going to do an invitational rather than an application process. So, those are things that Independent started 10 years ago. I think that, what you were saying is sort of building some of the methodology around design. I think those things are being taken of like, how do we make this experience, which is in some ways overwhelming, more intimate, or more about the value of the artwork and getting people to focus. How do we get people to focus? I mean, what Independent does so well is it introduces either historical material to a marketplace that's in development for that historical material, or it introduces new work by living artists. And the focus and the outcome is very different because of that focus. There are people who have, every year say, I never thought that we would have such a strong reaction in terms of museum placements and in terms of new collectors who are really serious and trustee level signing on for their first artwork by this artist. And we just know that had we taken it to a big marketplace fair, it would have been lost.
And do you think the moves that some of these existing, because I think for older fairs it becomes harder, or it takes longer to kind of move the beast. But do you think Art Basel's sort of changed pricing system, does that do enough to help?
I think anything that fairs do, because they are big organizations that are in the support and service of galleries, should be applauded. I really do. I have a more kind of let's take a giant step back approach and rethink. I'd like to look at the mechanisms of these engagements more from a macro level and say, can we change the infrastructure? Can we change the entire foundation of how this works? That's really always been my interest from the beginning. But I do believe that there are a lot of quick wins that help galleries, and we should be exploring all of them.
Are there any quick wins you can think of just now? Or is that including sort of the pricing
I
side
think
of
pricing
things?
is just one element of it. I also think just sharing with galleries how much things truly cost versus what the profit margin is.
As
would be
in-
very, very interesting for galleries, because then they understand where, if something is of value to them, I want to empower the galleries as much as possible to make their own choices and decisions, both curatorially in terms of what services they need from the fairs. And I think there needs, to me, the future of fair innovation in the next 10 years is going to be really interesting, because we are able to be more reactive to the change in collector behavior than maybe traditional galleries can be, because of the way that they're structured. So we can be the bridge between those changes and those behavioral changes, and also the gallery, and supporting the artist in the way that needs to be protected. And I do think that we can do a lot in regard to that, in terms of also sharing our network. We have a vast network of collectors and museum professionals who are supporting these galleries for more than a decade, and bringing that together in partnering with galleries throughout the course of the year. So that's a sustainable engagement of not just, having a discovery and having an acquisition take place that's meaningful for the gallery and the collector, or the gallery and the museum, but also really sustaining a broad, 12-month-a-year engagement where they don't lose the story and they are still evolving.
Well, this is a question for both of you, really. How do you really measure success? Isn't it actually, did you make sales? I mean, isn't that ultimately...
Well, it's always difficult, for us. Also, it's different because you are maybe much closer in the sense with the galleries. For us, with such big structure, is more difficult. It's easier for us to have a taste of that in Lisbon, for instance. But,
yes. How big is your fair in Lisbon?
In Lisbon, it's around 70 galleries.
Okay, so this is
max,
similar to Freeze, yes.
It's been only for 3 years. It's happening the 4th edition this year. So yes, it's difficult, but the way we measure success is through engagement of the galleries, basically. When they want to continue with the fair, when they want to be there again, when they understand there's a place for them, then we understand it's happening. Of course, we ask all the time, and we make all kind of service possible. But yes, of course, it's always difficult, because also what happens now is that we have to think also that ARC is such an old fair that all of memories come. Even me I have been in the fair since the 90s, even if not working. So we all know it with this background, no? And so this way of measuring changed, because in the past it was people would go buy and that was a success. Now we all understand that first take maybe 6 months to finalize, and then maybe that connection that someone made in Madrid will end up buying in independent Brussels, or will end up buying another fair. It's very difficult to measure that. So I think for all of us.
And also we have a change now, as also Eugenio was saying, is that the volume of transactions has shifted radically in the last year. So it's put the pressure on the market fairs. The return on investment has to be very, very, very quick for a gallery. It's because if you're going to spend $50,000 or $100,000 for a stand,
yes,
and you're going to Art Basel, they better deliver that market for you. But and that's really, it's not a sustainable enterprise to wait a year or two to get that return on investment. With more curatorial engaged fairs that have a unique point of view, independent being one of them, we are not working under that economy. We have no $50,000 booths. We also are working.
But it's still an effort. I suppose that there is. Yeah. I mean, there is a sort of trend at the moment for all fairs to say they're not a fair, but it is still a fair. People do still have to take time out.
Right.
And also there are costs. There are costs other than, and I don't know how much that is in your control.
There's a massive investment, but I think that you approach a fair like Independent as a gallery different than you approach a fair like Art Basel, and I think that both are equally meaningful, but they do different things. Independent is a place where you will get more time with a more sophisticated collector. If you are a gallery that, if you're 90% of the galleries in the world that are not dominating the top end of the market, but developing art and artists. And so that gives you a sense. And if we're, like, for instance, in New York in March, our 10th anniversary is coming up, and it is a tradition for collectors all over the world to come to New York at that time of year, to visit the fair and to spend all day at the fair. And you have, that sophisticated level of collectors, and the museum trustees bring their trustees as groups, and then museum directors come to see all of their patrons as well, and to see the artists. Artists come to our fair in a way that you don't see, because they don't see it necessarily as a completely commercial experience, but something that balances the commercial and the curatorial. And as a result of that, you have 50 galleries with your target audience that you would have in any fair in the world. That would be sort of the VIP program, which is the entire fair experience. So what we see is that there's just a lot more high-touch experiences, and that makes a huge impact into how the galleries are building their relationships with collectors. And it's a relationship-based business, and they just need more time together in order to evolve together.
And if fairs are getting more curatorial, or if that's the mood, and that's how you keep them relevant, what impact is that having on the galleries themselves? Because actually, traditionally, your curated show would happen in your space.
It's a way of supporting that. I think when we first want to do that, it's a way of paying respect to the work galleries do. That by giving them that space, for instance, we of course, the curated sections are very important in ARCO since the beginning. I think it's one of the traditions, it's one of the spirits of the fair.
And you have a guest country, don't you? And also
guest country,
contemporary,
and a concept that changes now every 2 years.
Okay.
Then we have the young gallery section, and we have a new section called dialogues. That's a way of working on those curatorial approaches. We also invented this solo duo, which is not a section, not a concept. It's a proposal for galleries to go deeper in the presentation of their artists. We also created those spaces for special projects, so they can present just one artist. So we are all doing that effort to helping them work in a way that it's closer to the way they work in the galleries.
But do you understand, I suppose, if I were an art gallery, and you must understand as gallerists, that actually you're sitting thinking, okay, I'm out of my space for this number of weeks a year. I have to think curatorially about what I'm bringing to these fairs. I don't really need my physical space. But if I don't have a physical space, I won't get into a fair. Is that an area, where do you sit on that?
Yeah, right now we are still keeping, as I said, not also due to the structure, we're still keeping that as a rule, also having exhibitions. But I think, being a bit romantic, I think that space, the space the galleries have with their artists, is essential for the creation of art. If we skip that, we're missing half the possibilities. In fact, for instance, something we do that it's very, very symbolic, but I think it's important because also the relevance you have in your context is very important to keep and take care of. We organize walks to the galleries 1 week before ARCO and for the opening of the season.
Around the
what we call
fair.
gallery
That's
walks.
good. Yes.
Around the city. We do it in Madrid, we do it in Barcelona, Valencia, and then we will do it in Palma de Mallorca next year, to bring people to the galleries. So we really want, if we ask the galleries to keep their own spaces, we also have to support somehow a local scene by taking people to their spaces, because that's what I would consider really a loss, like obvious and really tremendous.
Do you, I want to use the word regional in a positive way, but that sounds to me like the role of a regional fair. Do you consider yourself a regional fair?
I think no.
No.
Not a regional fair. I think
No one does.
that's something that, of course, it's something to explore. Maybe with
it's
Lisbon,
interesting.
with Lisbon, that it's a size
Fair enough.
that it's responding to the scene. The fair started as a request from the galleries, from Portuguese galleries.
In Lisbon.
Yeah, in
Well,
Lisbon.
that would Joe Kennedy will be happy. It came from the people.
It came from the galleries. And that is really representing, I think in that case it's very strong, the presence of the local scene. It has to be very strong. That's how Madrid started back in the 80s. Then it grows and it takes another entity and it becomes international. So our investigation now is looking towards Latin America for obvious reasons, and trying to really go a bit deeper and learning a bit and sharing that knowledge.
I think fairs can easily be a place of exploration or testing things. I think that's a great a great
For
area
the
and
artists
territory.
and the galleries.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you have a traditional gallery, you have maybe the potential to do 6 or 7 exhibitions a year with your artists. You represent, on average, between 20 and 80 artists, depending on the scale of your gallery. You want to have, you know, an ongoing conversation with the patrons of your artists throughout the course of the year. Sometimes there's more experimental practices happening in the studio that don't have necessarily require a duration of 6 weeks. They can happen for a weekend, and I know, you know, most of the galleries that I respect and admire think of the fair as satellite exhibition program, not as a selling marketplace. So they will approach with the same level of detail and design those presentations at fairs. They will communicate, they will invite writers to come in, iterate conversations around what the artist is producing for the fair. And there will even be sometimes a public program during the fair, and then after the fair, an ongoing engagement. So we are part of that support team, and we're there to serve them and to bring that closer to its ideal audience and make sure that voice is really singular and autonomous within our platform.
And just to take you, and I agree with your romantic ideal as well. It would be wonderful if you can have your gallery and do fairs. But how? And if a gallery is to see it as a satellite, a sort of addition to their program, and if you are a one venue gallery, say 1 or 2, how many fairs would you advise a gallerist to do a year, and what sort? You know, do you mix them up if you have the choice?
If you have the choice, yeah. I mean, that's maybe one of the most difficult strategic decisions for a gallery. And I mean, I was a gallerist for a short time, so no, it's not comparable. But still, it's true that in that period of time, you have the fantasy you're going to be accepted in Basel, and then you realize very soon that's not for you because you're a very young gallery or not in that level of position. So you really need to first go visit the fairs that you think will be yours. Try to connect with the context somehow. Try to engage with local collectors. You just cannot go there and set your shop. It's very difficult. It's a really competitive world. So you really need to do. I mean, apart from working with your artists, presenting your shows, you need to investigate on offers before doing them. There's the number depends on the amount of money the galleries have and the energy and the team. But for a gallery that is starting, I would say 4 fairs, 3-4 fairs is enough.
I don't know that I can make such a generalization because every gallery is so uniquely different. And also the climate affects things too. We're living in a time where there's more regionalization in the marketplace. So it might make more sense to do some self-reflection as a gallery and say, you know, do I have a lot of Belgian collectors?
Yes.
How do I keep a relationship with them? I might not see them. They may not be buying at Frieze London this year. Maybe I want to do something unique for them. But that doesn't necessarily always have to be a fair. I have a very open mind about that because we've always had an exhibition program as well where we will work with a gallery at a time to find exhibition space for them to do an exhibition rather than which is independent projects.
Through you, yes.
Yes, so we even had, for 3 years our own gallery that gallerists could take, and we subsidized that. So it was, rather than risking a new marketplace without any root system for 4 days, we would always suggest coming and doing an exhibition for 6 weeks in a uniquely tailored space that was addressing some of the concerns that their artists wanted to take on. And then we would support that structure through introductions and staffing the space so they didn't always have to be there and communicating throughout the course, and they could come in. It was almost like a residency program. And we'd love to do more of that. The cost of space has become increasingly expensive. We've also supported, former gallerists like Jay Gorney, who has done our fair when he was, before he became a partner at Paula Cooper Gallery. He was operating as an independent curator, collaborating with galleries to bring new artists forward that he was looking at, and he was doing that with such a regularity and with such great interest to collectors and museum curators that we thought why not? Why shouldn't Jay be invited to do an exhibition at Independent? And he was so happy to have his own platform for that weekend, and that
there
worked
other
well.
ways,
So we're very
perhaps?
open in terms of those boundaries. We
Are there
don't
other
see
ways,
them there.
perhaps digitally, also to sort of work for your galleries in the
Yes.
other 51 weeks of the year? Do you do other things outside of the...
Yeah, I mean, like digital
dates?
strategies, and on one hand, I was thinking, we've been talking a lot about technology also these days, which is
Yeah.
of course essential. But in another position, I think, I mean, the innovation we are offering to the world is conceptual, and we need to use technology because it's one tool to have not out of hand, but not be crazy about that, especially from the first, because we are offering like
A tangible experience,
tangible
yes.
experience. And on the other hand, of course, we are all the time thinking how to use Instagram. What's the best way for an author to use Instagram? I haven't seen perfect formula yet, and we try to create platforms also like capsule platforms along the year, so galleries can present. Or we create, like last November or last December, we made like this little project that we call Me compro una obra, I buy an artwork.
I wrote about it.
Yeah,
I like
it's
because you now do it
nice.
online.
Yeah. We did it
and,
with a platform from Barcelona
yeah.
called Koyak, and it was a way of offering like another possibility to the galleries, and especially one of the obsessions, the offers we have, is creating new collectors, is creating new buyers who will become collectors in the future. So that was our little, that's one of the strategies.
That's the area I am particularly interested in, actually, because I actually think you will get people to your fairs, because actually a fair is an experience, and everything we've heard is that people like experiences. You may get different people every year, but people come. How do you turn the visitors into buyers, or do you just say, what do you say to your exhibitors? You say, just wait, be patient.
We just start.
I
We do so many
think
things.
technology is the really one. We're going to see the most innovation in the next 10 years with fairs and technology. But it's the way technology in the art world has happened up until this point, I find very ineffective, because whether it's Artsy or other platforms, the goal seems to be to replicate the art world as it currently is, rather than what the future of culture could look like. And I think once we start having a broader, forward-facing conversation that tries to kind of forecast the future, it's got to get a lot more interesting. I don't know that.
I'm going to open it to questions very, very soon, but I'm going to ask you both, because you've beautifully segued somewhere that I wanted to go. What is the art fair scene in 5 years' time?
The art fair. Well, I can only speak for Independent, which is sort of an unusual. But I think a deeper, more 360-day, probably with technology, 24-hour-a-day experience. I think we're going to see more opportunities in the territory of telling the story of the creator, the artist, and the gallery as a program and as a kind of an innovator. I think we're going to have a broader context of what each gallery represents and what its true voice is than we do today, because I think communication is really where we talk a lot about the limitations of brick and mortar with gallery stages, but I think the way to kind of transcend that problem, which is being embraced, is communication. Telling the narratives of why artists are in a program and what their relationship is to each other, the story and the history of how the gallery formed and evolved, the personalities behind the gallery brick and mortar, and how shows come into being and what their life cycle is, and then what happens after the shows once they go out into the world and are disseminated into homes, museums, exhibitions. There's so many stories, like with Independent, we're beginning to tell, like, in the last conference I was in, David Zwerner talked about discovering Jordan Wolfson at Independent, and we haven't told that story.
Yeah.
He told that story. So this is where, and this is where things...
You've told it now.
Yeah, but and there's for that story, there's so many stories that we have, because there's such a unique moment. And even when Emmanuel Periton yesterday, so I loved picture he painted about the Gramercy International, which was one of our kind of cornerstone models, and how he discovered, so many artists discovered his artists there, and then he went on to other fairs worldwide and discovered some of his most important artists that have been with his life, of the gallery. And it's broader than a commercial context. It's so much more, and I think this is where we're going to move in the next 10 years.
And hopefully with some sales.
Sales are important. Yes.
I'm really happy.
Do you have a vision?
Started.
Do you have a vision of the art fair, either the whole landscape or something?
Well,
to
I was thinking about the landscape. I think it's gonna change a lot. It's going. I mean, because we are now all thinking and talking about it. The way you started, all the references you gave. It's not that I can say this or that is going to happen, but I'm sure we're going to see changes. And we are all going to work very hard. I think what Elizabeth was saying, communication of what we do. And through that communication, through the investigation of how to communicate, I'm sure we are all going to evolve to better new contexts, new ways of reshaping what we want to do. So, I mean, I'm just starting in this position, so I have a lot of thinking to do.
Yes, that's
But this will
exciting.
help me a lot.
The change will come from here.
Yeah.
I am
Hopefully.
going to open it up to questions. It's probably a bit of a biased question to ask two fair organisers if fair's a fair. So I'd be quite interested if there are any questions from the floor. There's Marion just here on the right. Well, my right, sorry.
Hi. Actually, we've been talking for 2 days a lot about transparency in the art market. And we all agree that galleries need art fair. But don't you think that we really would need more transparency from the art fair, as you were saying? But I'm talking about, you have two models, one of selection, one of invitation, but I'm not sure we know exactly how it works, really. I don't think we have more information. We don't know how you work with VIP. And I think that if we want to collaborate more on that in the future, I think we should find solution for that, because for galleries to wait to apply, to wait for answers of the application, it takes more than a few months sometimes. It's really hard to organize your program, to make a strategy of your program of the 1 or 2 year. So I really think that I think maybe in the future we would need to have better collaboration in between galleries, and I think that we need more engagement from the fairs to
be able to control.
Yeah, to have more exchange and to build a better collaboration, because of course you have a good collaboration with mega galleries, but you don't have such precise collaboration with mid-sized galleries.
Could
I'm
we be
so glad you
fairer?
brought that up, because this is where this idea of collaboration partnership, which we're seeing play out among generations of galleries, need to become more in a vertical hierarchy. And I think there's so much potential there. And the VIP initiatives of fairs typically have been completely ineffective. And the reason for that is that they never hired people who had a track record and had those relationships with getting collectors to buy with them at galleries. So they often hired people who maybe come from the gallery world, but their role was just to update the mailing list of collectors and make sure that they had the right emails and had the right VIP card. That is not effective. That does nothing for the galleries, and it's something that we really listen to that conversation, and we build a totally different structure, and we build it with the galleries with a high level of communication and openness and trust, because they're trusting us with their client bases, and we are the aggregate of those client bases of those galleries. We have now in 10 years collaborated with over 300 galleries. So we should be leveraging that as a resource for every gallery, whether they're in our fair that year or they choose to sit out that year, or they are rotated, because we have such a high rotation in our project because of the scale, and we don't want to get bigger. So we should be really working to that, and I think that is also the other territory we're going to see change, and I think it's a positive.
Do you think also could ARCO be more open about how it's letting people
regarding
in? And
the process of application, being as we are a public institution, that it's really complicated. I mean, the way the selection is done, it's very clear. When galleries apply, know how they're going to be charged, under which concepts. But it's true that we need to renew that and start from zero every year, which of course it's not good to planify or to plan for 1-2 years. Regarding the VIP and collectors program, we really try to do that really close to the galleries, getting every year their collectors, their list. I mean, they come from them. We know we cannot just go to the most 100 powerful and invite them because maybe ARCO is not the place for them. So we really try to handpick every single.
But how do you do that with so many galleries?
We ask them. We ask the
You
galleries.
pull it all. Wow.
Every year they bring us the name and then we invite them in their name. We really try to make that connection that it's not our connection but the galleries and the collectors pass the list of the people who is confirmed. We really try to make that transparent and help galleries to work the better way possible.
Thank you. Was there another question? No, oh, yes. Hi. An art fair organizer.
Yes, and I mean maybe it's a question of art fair organizer, but like, you know, the title of the panel, which is an interesting one about being, you know, is the art fair system unfair, and we talk about the problems that the galleries might have, and you know about applying to a fair, but it's also, I think, a question that we can reverse about how the fair is doing with the galleries not also committing as well. You know, they usually apply, they're usually accepted, they don't pay on time. You know, there's a lot of also other problems that the galleries have, that the fairs have to deal with, you know, that, you know, so I think it's a both-way system here in terms of transparency, you know, and when a fair wants to apply and, you know, basically they are committed to doing a fair. I know that in the past, and to respond to Marianne's questions, you know, we had galleries apply with the idea of participating, but then they were not really happy when the application process was starting as early as it did, you know, and actually
in order to commit too soon.
Yeah, to commit too soon and to pay
yes,
too
you're right.
soon.
Maybe you can't win.
And I feel like there's something that is happening more and more now is that the galleries are applying, they are accepted, and they are determining the terms. They decide when they want to pay. They decide when, you know, and sometimes I had big galleries telling me, you know, this is how we do things, you know, we pay, you know, at this moment,
yes.
and you don't have really a choice. Either you want us or you don't want us. So I think that I just want... even smaller galleries, you know, like in my cases, I deal with Africa, you know, I deal with all sorts of size of galleries. So the question is really, you know, for the big affairs where I see a problem is really, you know, how the application process, I know it's by invitation, but who is part of that selection committee? This is also where I feel there's a problem in
this
general.
Is where I did think we could do a Kenny Schachter 3-day seminar when we started on selection. But that is, I mean, I suppose the question is, you know, are galleries fair to you? I mean, you get quite a lot of stick, right, as an art fair organizer from 300 potentially 300.
It's a parallel to having a gallery. It's very similar. Just a bigger gallery, and the artists are the gallerists.
Okay.
And so I see it more you know, and some of the most interesting voices that bring some of the most valued presentations are the most idiosyncratic, or are not the most kind of professional, and they're selected because they are not, and because they occupy a space that's very important to preserve and protect, and it's. I think it comes down to having a really good dialogue too, doesn't it? Because I think sometimes when you need to reach out to galleries about the urgency of something, and it's not part of their agenda whatsoever because they don't even have a purview into why it would be urgent. You know, just sharing how similar our systems and worlds are, and why something might need to happen this week versus in 2 months. You know, whether it's what they want to bring, or you know, their shipping and their insurance documents to make sure that their work is protected, or any of those more boring things that we could talk about offline. It's you know, I'm not on the front line of that as a co-founder, but I. Whenever the team says, you know, how do we communicate this? I said, always open it up and share what is going on the team side, because the second you say, once we've been thinking about how to best serve you here, and if we had this information beforehand, it would be so much better. Like, for instance, with press promotion of the fair, and so that people like Melanie know what's going to be on view, so they can come and cover it.
I have written about things that are coming on view that are then not at the fair.
Oh yeah,
I'm used to it as well. Yeah.
Images that you're like, I've seen this
hang
work
on.
before. This is not fresh to the world. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just communicating that and then sharing with them what other galleries are bringing gives them a sense of context. If I feel galleries function on context, it's like, oh, well, I didn't realize Maureen Paley was bringing that sculpture. I should really figure out which sculptural object do I need a pedestal? Do I need a plinth? Do I need this? Do I need to get an image for the press team? Suddenly there's an urgency. So maybe it's because we have a smaller space, a smaller situation. I don't know if this could be done at ARCO, for instance.
We do. I was agreeing to everything you were saying. It's right. The galleries are our artists. As artists are to galleries, as I totally agree. We take care of them, we share with them. Every situation is different. It's true that they make us suffer sometimes, but totally what you're saying. Yeah, it's all about sharing and having time and devoting time to those situations. Yeah.
Sharing the suffering too. Are there any more questions, or should we take it? I don't want to keep you from coffee, but I do want to thank Elizabeth, Maribel. What wonderful speakers, and two very different but both wonderful fairs. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.